Sorry about that. Like, dude, this intro music is killing me, right? Oh my
Elevator music, it's awesome, right?
Like 3 minutes. That was like way too long. Like, we need to cut that stuff down to like 5 seconds. But then again, we won't have an opportunity to get our dance moves on while we're waiting. So, hey everybody, welcome to this week's edition of Team Tim. I'm Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Risk, here as always with our co-partner Tim Schnurr from Fort Mesa, Jesse Miller, and Corey. What is this? Corey, PC Matic. Like, this is very interesting. Like, we have a great show for you today. If you ever want to learn and understand what the heck whitelisting is that even the right term nowadays? I don't know. Allowlisting. Got to get my PC stuff right.
There's a little joke there, right? It's not PC, but it's PC Matic. The whitelisting, I had to get rid of it.
Exactly. So anyways, welcome. Corey, why don't you give us a quick little 30-second who, what, where, when, how, and hello, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Name's Corey Munson. I am Vice President of Channel Partnerships here at PC Matic. I work with anywhere from our reseller partners to our affiliates to our MSPs. Maybe I'm playing to the audience, but my favorite partners happen to be MSPs, so I spend most of my time there. Been with the company now in July, it'll be 17 years. PC Matic's been around for 25, so I've been there for the gradual and sometimes quick ascent to where we are today.
Nice. Hey, thanks for that little introduction. So, Tim, you had a question, right? What was your question? I forget. We were talking about it.
Yeah, so I wanted to try something a little different this week because, we're bringing different vendors on week to week, and they have different functionality and different roles they can play for MSPs. So I think it'd be fun, just to hear your thoughts, Tim, Jesse. I'll dive in as well in terms of what is Allowlisting, or what is, just right off the bat, what is?
Oh, so rapid fire. Jesse.
Rapid fire. What's your gut thought?
Jesse, go.
Let's go. Allowlisting would be selecting a specific list of applications that are allowed and stopping the ones that aren't.
Nice. Tim, go.
So I think it's that. I think it's scripts as well, right? Scripts, files that are allowed to run. The entire universe of code, and some of it is allowed and some of it's not allowed. But Tim, your turn, and then we'll ask the expert.
I'm so wrong here, because I thought it was you're not allowed to do the dishes, you're not allowed to touch the laundry, you're not allowed to that's what I thought you meant. Because when I do laundry, everything comes out pink, or when I do the dishes, nothing gets clean. So my version of allow list is, I guess I'm completely wrong, but why not go directly to the source? Corey, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. And I hate the fact that Tim said expert. Remember, I'm the sales and marketing arm here. We're not going to go too far into the weeds, but at its core, what we're doing is specifically application allow listing. It definitely extends, like Tim referenced, into scripts and other activity. But what we're doing is enabling a security posture, a default deny security posture that says the only things that will be allowed to run in a given universe are what are known to be good, and blocking all the rest. There's definitely more of an application control feel to those that just simply want to build their own list and say, here's what I'm going to allow to run inside the environment and nothing else. But this is what we're dealing with is actually taking a step beyond that. We're saying, broadly speaking, everything will be blocked unless we know it to be good. And then we can always add in proprietary one-off software that needs to run inside of an environment. But every time we have this conversation, some people will see it as, is this URL filtering? Is this some sort of web filter? What exactly is? No, we're specifically talking about executables and scripts.
It sounded like you said starting from nothing and then allowing as you go, right? So is that almost like a least trust, zero trust? Do you guys market yourself as a zero trust or least trust tool?
Yeah, it's actually a really good point. We've got a really deep relationship with the NIST Cybersecurity Center of Excellence as they've been building out there what zero trust looks like. And I think we're the only application allow listing vendor that was asked to be a part of that process. So we see ourselves at the core of zero trust. I mean, this is really foundational. If you can't identify what's running inside your environment or even control what's running inside your environment, I mean, is zero trust even practical? So we think we're really foundational to that conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah, good. So talk a minute about like the NIST Center. Like I look, you just talk about it because I know what it is and I don't want to give it away. But why don't you talk about that for a few seconds?
I don't spend a heck of a lot of time with that relationship, but I can tell you that there are 25 cybersecurity vendors right now, at least as it relates to their zero trust initiative and what they're building out there for guidelines. And we were one of the 25 that were vetted and asked to be a voice into that process. And one of the reasons they brought us to the table was they saw Allowlisting as being fundamental to the bigger, broader scope of what zero trust could be. But it's just more of some of the good things that NIST happens to be doing. But Allowlisting, you can connect the dots from NIST to CIS controls to what's happening with CMMC and beyond, even Essential Aid over in Australia, and you'll see Allowlisting pop up time and time again. Check out any of the CISA bulletins that are popping up every 24 hours. Under the mitigation strategies, Allowlisting is prominently featured as a strongly suggested best practice.
Yeah, and I like the fact that we've kind of gone a little PC and modified the word, because years ago it used to be a different set of acronyms, and I like the fact that we've done that before. And I wish I knew about this years ago, because what we used to do is what was the Microsoft tool that used to be out? AppV, I think, right? So we had this thing from Microsoft called AppV, and it didn't really work all that great, but it was a similar concept. You remember AppV, Corey?
I can't specifically speak to it, but the whole concept has been around 30 plus years. You've been able to manually do something like this if you wanted to, but historically it was thought to be a giant pain in the ass. That's why nobody even bothered messing around with it. So
on that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like it's a game of scale, right? Like you basically have this universe of like files, code, script, and you have to decide like what's okay and what's not okay. Talk a little bit about like the history, like the size of the company, like how you guys have been doing this, at scale. Like I assume it's a worldwide operation. People are up in the middle of the night, just kind of like, I don't know if that looks okay. Yeah, we'll let it go, right? So
yeah, there's definitely a piece of it. I mean, I'll take you back to day one, 25 years later. So the company really grew up in the consumer space. We were early on in the whole performance optimization tools, building that kind of software. And as Windows machines became a little bit more self-sufficient, we didn't see as much of a need for that. And that's where we pivoted into the security space. But the more conversations we had there has to be something better than the traditional old antivirus approach to things and the whole whack-a-mole, try to push out definitions every time something new pops up. And that's where we saw some movement towards, or at least some strong suggestion towards, there'd be a market for an Allowlisting tool that was in some ways more efficient to be able to deploy at scale and manage at scale if we could come up with something. And that's what we built out. Started in the SMB space, quickly found we had MSPs that were using even our consumer product to actually leverage this. And 25 years later, we're now FedRAMP approved for use within the federal government because there's demand there. And we're being used by multiple state agencies across the country too. So we've grown into 70 employees later. And yes, many are up in the middle of the night classifying good from bad.
You're saying all my favorite words. FedRAMP, CMMC. Maybe there's an API integration we should talk about at some point. But yeah, you're saying all my favorite words. Hey, Jesse, hearing a little bit about Corey, hearing a little bit about what they're doing, like, what are your thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, I was interested for this week's episode because, when I hear whitelisting or I hear Allowlisting, immediately almost a Pavlovian response of pain pops into my mind, and it's an instant recoil, right? Typically, I've seen really the only time it's successful or at least accepted is in government or defense applications because it's required and it's kind of a non-negotiable. Do you see how do you see this being leveraged by other industries, and how does PC Matic kind of bridge that gap and lower that barrier of entry for the regular quote unquote MSP to be able to deploy this and make it effective for their clients?
Yeah, we've done a couple of things. We can get into the details. As a overarching use case, I can tell you we've got school districts right now that are using this across tens of thousands of endpoints, staffed by IT staff of one, and this guy is also monitoring study hall halftime. So I think we've got a strong case to be made that this can be efficient. We can knock down some of these historical preconceived notions that it's going to be difficult. So we've done it a couple of ways. One, there's always the challenge of being able to deploy this across multiple endpoints, multiple locations at once, and then it's the ongoing management. So from a deployment standpoint, one of the things we've done that's fairly unique is we've created our own list of what we know to be good in the universe, what we've seen over 25 plus years of being in business, and created that as our curated what we call global allow list. So on day one, instead of an MSP setting out to define here's what's going to be allowed to run inside the environment, they can use that as the baseline to build upon, and then add anything proprietary, anything one-off. We can even take a quick view and even say, hey, on day one, this is going to be blocked. And use that as the baseline instead of some sort of learning mode that could take weeks, months, whatever the case may be. So that number one has been a big step forward.
And that's been a lot of the challenges with a lot of the tools that I've used and I've seen across the ecosystem over the years is they're noisy. And I spend a lot of time in my MSP, or my security analyst spends a lot of time in our MSP, like whittling down the noise to actionable stuff. So the fact that you have here is our global list of the things that we've spent a lot of time understanding and blocking, then you can tweak thereafter. So it feels like you've cut down a lot of that noise, especially from the MSP perspective. If I got 1,000 endpoints out there, that gets loud fast.
Absolutely. And that's a giant step forward there, because if there are other solutions out there, and there are, a lot of the feedback you hear is it's a big cultural shift to be able to roll something like this out. But if you can cut into that and make it more practical to even get it deployed across tens of thousands of endpoints in a matter of 48 hours versus a couple of months, then all of a sudden it becomes a more viable solution. So deployment's the big first step we made.
So
how much of that? So how much of that? I can imagine the upfront, as you said, you're trying to jumpstart that with some kind of standardized, clean bill of health, right? Of things that are okay. Do you guys have a metric? And this might be helpful for Jesse. Jesse, we didn't really get into his background, but he helps MSPs build their cybersecurity programs. So how can you think about if you had 1,000 endpoints, is there some kind of understanding or rough idea you can convey to them? What do I expect to how much do I have to deal with on a daily basis in terms of or is it just so many knobs we can turn up the level of concern, right? I guess I'm just trying to get a feel of putting my feet in an MSP of how much hourly usage of my staff we're going to use. So
sure. So let's talk about it twofold. One is, if you take a look at this global allow list that we're building off of, it's got 22 plus billion entries into it. So there's a good chance that we've seen just about anything that's going to run inside an environment, because one of the big concerns, and this goes back to the historical knocks against allow listing, is what about false positives? How many times is something going to get flagged that should be running, and all of a sudden some department's brought to a halt, or the production line is shut down for the day until somebody can override this thing? So the fact that we've got such a broad view up front of what's running out there in the universe is somewhat comforting. But knowing that false positives will happen, it's the nature of allow listing. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're going to run this kind of solution and never ever come across the false positive, because you will. It's just It's what's going to happen.
Right.
It's what happens when that occurs. And in our environment, two things will happen. One, and these things happen in parallel. The local administrator, in this case, the MSP, is notified. You can override it in a matter of seconds. You can do it from any internet accessible device. It's no more complicated than that. But in parallel, it also gets pushed up to the cloud, and our malware research team gets its hands on it, and we'll make a classification and push it out globally, typically within minutes. In some edge cases, we're talking about maybe a longer amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
But even as an MSP, if you don't want to touch this thing and not be involved with having to override something unless it's pressing, you can depend on our malware research team to take care of that. And and again, that goes a long way to address that false positive issue.
I was gonna say,
so it's it can almost largely run on its own. Sounds like, Corey. Yeah.
In many cases, it does.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to circle back real quick to something that you said a few minutes ago. You brought up the cultural shift, right? And we hear Team Tim and Jesse, we talk a lot about like helping those MSPs explain the culture shift. So Jesse, what when you're thinking about tools like this and Allowlisting, like how would you kind of approach that with the cultural shift?
Yeah, and that's why I say the best cultural shift is the one you don't have to make. And so with Allowlisting, there traditionally has to be a cultural shift. Okay, there's going to be some pain while we get this off the ground. We'll have to put systems in place to report this. If you click on this and it doesn't work, let the help desk know. And I've been a part of these deployments with different tools that have really caused black eyes for our MSP in the past because it hindered the business. So, I'm curious to I guess my question would be, and I'm going to put myself in an MSP's shoes questioning you and say, is it really advisable to turn it on day one, or should it be, or is it better? Is there a way to run it for a week without having any sort of blocking and seeing what we see just as a safety net? Like if there's somebody that's reticent to do that, are you like, hey, yeah, that's fine, we can go ahead and do that? Or, what's the story there?
Yeah, we can play it from either side, and there's always going to be that concern. I mean, we with a pretty high degree of confidence, given that 22 billion, and then taking a pretty broad look at what else is running, and being able to present that to the MSP or the end user and say, here's what we're going to block on day one. Let's make some calls on that right now. If we're able to make that step, we're pretty confident we can get that thing off the ground right away.
Yeah,
there is a learning mode option where you can just set it and let it absorb and get a feel for what it's going to do, once you go live. But in the majority of cases, we're just turning it on and going.
Yeah, and that's more just for me being ultra cautious. So if I turn it on and I look for a week and I say, oh, great, I don't see anything. Yeah, turn it on. Let's go. Let's rock. So the ability to do that is pretty cool. So
well, the industry as a whole, right? So, and we talked about this several weeks ago, like when I came into one of the organizations and I disabled admin access and I started doing and locking things down before tools existed, I was called Big Bad Tim, right? I was called the No Tim, right? Everything about it was no. Fortunately, over the years with our clients and our MSP, we've been able to address and explain the why and help them understand the cultural shift. So now, with people like Jesse and conversations, we can get into the starting off right with a new client in the MSP, using some of the tools and the technologies and brain trust of people like Jesse to be able to build that why case and be able to start at the very beginning. And instead of being Big Bad Tim, it's here's why we do these things, and start that cultural shift in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why I'm asking this question, is I'm so uber sensitive to security being the department of no, and recoiling from that. We don't want to be that anymore. We want to be business enablers and business consultants. And so I guess that's my sensitivity to that question there. But as part of that, then I feel great. I feel good about that. And like you said, leveraging the global knowledge base to do that solves for that. Now, in terms of building this into my security stack as an MSP, how do I talk about this with my clients? What's a way that I can build this into my stack and say, okay, we're going to do allow listing. And the client says, well, don't I have EDR already? Why do we need allow listing? How does those two play together?
Yeah, I think to build on that too, Jesse, like, as I said, being in the operation of being the Mr. No, it's like, if you're the sysadmin, like, you can't fire the guy from the same company, but they could easily get pissed off at the MSP that's like, nothing ever works because like this allow listing tool and this zero trust and least trust. And as you said, like, I can't even like, look up the score of the game last night because like the website doesn't work, right? So, as you said, like, how do you get the client comfortable with that, right? Like, or on board with, we're doing all these Dr. No things because it's going to keep the company safe. So, I think that's a question for everyone. But Corey, like, any kind of experience, like, you're in sales, but I'm sure you're also in customer success. And how do those conversations go?
I think the challenge is, who are these MSPs talking to? We, in too many situations, we have our MSPs that we're trying to partner with and help them have more strategic conversations with their end users. But in too many cases still, and it's almost hard to believe we're still saying this, MSPs are walking through the door wanting to have a conversation about speeds and feeds. And maybe there's a place for that. If there's an IT lead, or if we're talking about a small business with it's the business owner, and he's just trying to keep the lights on and make payroll, to walk in there and have a conversation with him about allow listing is probably going to make him or her, have their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
So to them, I think it becomes a more bigger, broader, hey, here's what we're going to be able to do. We've got some technology that will basically lock these endpoints down and not allow anything to run unless it's known to be good.
Yeah.
To have a deeper conversation, if somebody's a little more IT sensitive, I think that's a different approach. But the crazy thing to me is we still have these MSPs that want to have these deep technical conversations with people that aren't armed to appreciate it.
Exactly.
Do you talk about, so I'm going to go to ransomware, we'll bring that out early, but clearly this is like one of the best weapons for ransomware, because ransomware comes in, the payload's in the email, it's phishing, it looks like something else, it's a fake invoice, it's something else, right? Like, you guys seem like you're Johnny on the spot right there to knock that thing out. So do you tell that story kind of early, or you tell the MSP to tell their customers these kind of stories, and maybe even give us one if you get a chance?
We don't hesitate to talk about it. It's optimal because a lot of these things have never been seen before, and in an allow listing environment, if it's never been seen before, it's not going to be allowed to run. So it's pretty easy to tell that story if the audience can appreciate what that even means.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ransomware. It's interesting. We've been having a lot of these conversations recently. Should MSPs be out there talking about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and leading with these ransomware conversations, or is there a better, more strategic way to talk about cybersecurity? And we've talked about, initiating your cybersecurity conversations around, let's drive down the cost of your cybersecurity insurance premium. Let's get you aligned with NIST so you're better qualified for these tax incentives that are probably going to be coming down at a federal or state level soon.
Jesse, I love the dog.
Yeah. Nice.
And
Just trying to distract you, Corey.
Yeah. So
I thought it was a pillow earlier, and then I saw it move.
There's no short of ransomware stories to be told and to lead with. I would just contend maybe there's too much of that right now.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a fair assumption that the people we're talking to, these end users and potential MSP customers, are already scared enough. They've seen the headlines. Let's walk through the door with some solutions that are a little more tied to their business continuity and strategy.
Yeah, and that's always been our mindset of helping MSPs shift left, think different, build the defensibility, have those conversations as a business leader, right? Jesse, you used those terms earlier, right?
That's right. Yeah, and I think, just I want to circle back quick just for some pragmatic advice for MSPs. I think that where I was leading with that initial question is, what we want this to be is not a conversation about another endpoint tool. We want to have this be a conversation about holistic endpoint protection. And I think the conversation is we use a suite of endpoint protection tools, Allowlisting being one of them, EDR being one of them, antivirus being one of them for a layered defense mechanism for your endpoints. And I think talking about kind of that as a philosophy rather than getting into speeds and feeds about Allowlisting is really the way to have that. And so I think that's the discussion point, right? And then I think the next piece is, okay, well, that's great, but now as an MSP owner, I got to pay for another software license to secure my endpoints better. And so, I think talking about the affordability piece is important too. And I just wanted to touch on that because, Corey, I know that the tool is pretty affordable. So I just wanted to put that out there for people.
Yeah. Thanks for teeing that up.
Yeah.
With us, we're talking about less than $1 per endpoint per month. So as an addition to the stack, and knowing that MSPs are always mindful on costs that are going into the stack, it's pretty negligible there.
Right.
And so if I all right, little technical weeds here for a minute. It's yet another agent on the machine. All right, I'm going to be the guy because I'm always the guy. Like, what's the overhead? What's the blow? What's the CPU? What's the RAM? Like, you probably don't have all of that as probably not the technical or sales engineer, but I always think about that. Like, great.
Here's what I'll proudly hold up here, and it's some of the third-party testing we're doing with AV Test. And for those who are familiar with what an AV Test evaluates, one of their core competencies over there is what impact does the agent have performance-wise. For the last 2 years, we have taken home the award for least impact on the endpoint. So we can proudly say that there's a minimal performance impact overall. Happy to provide the exact numbers. But
yeah, I've seen it operate. Yeah, it's how much you push to the edge, right? So you're basically guessing what's like on a daily regular like scripts and files, and if you're outside of that normal, then it's phone at home, right? It's like, so it doesn't, as long as you're typical or normal or like whatever you guys define that as, it's at the edge and it's not too heavy.
Right.
So
I'm gonna keep going here. Is there tools?
We're nerding out. Yeah.
Is there tools in my stack I can replace, like my EDR, my MDR, my next gen AV, my blah, blah, like all of these things? Like when I look at the agents running on my MSP endpoints, I'm like, if I could just get rid of all of them and have one, not that I would want that because we build defense in depth, and not that I would say PC Matic is going to get rid of rest of the stuff, but maybe there's a couple of things I might look at, right? Maybe I want to get rid of my semantic antivirus. Oh, did I say that out loud?
So two thoughts there, Tim. One, the way we lead is this as a complementary product. That we encourage people to maintain their current AV and their EDR and their XDR solutions, and it's very much complementary. I can tell you that some of our larger deployments, it has been rip and replace. They've dumped their current endpoint solution and replaced it in its entirety with this. And these are clients that have been with us for multiple years now and running thousands of endpoints. So can it stand alone? Absolutely. And we've got use case to bear that out in a more defense in depth sensitive environment. Yeah, it'll coexist very, very well with any of those other solutions. And we can make the argument that it will reduce a lot of the noise that's feeding out the back end to your EDR, XDR solutions as well.
Nice.
What about services? I mean, Tim, you're talking about replacing tools, but just like a daily, like this isn't a service or it could be considered a service because some MSPs still grant local admin, right? Right? Like, does it basically handle that, right? Like, because you can't install a new application or new something on your, even a browser extension. I don't know how far you go and how far you reach, Corey, but that largely would fall down to be a manual intervention, right? Like between a client and someone at the help desk saying like, oh yeah, we're not going to let you install, I don't know, Shazam or something, right? Like,
yeah, we've to some degree we've got the ability to put some policies in place to restrict that. But it's definitely not the core function of what we're dealing with right now.
I just had a thought, right? So Windows 10, hopefully we're all mostly migrated to that. Windows 11 right down the street. Windows 42, whatever, it doesn't matter. Windows App Store apps, right? Like I can, with the click of a button, don't matter if I have admin rights or not, I can install an app through the App Store on Windows machines with the click of a button. Like, how does that play in, right? Because
yeah, it's not something we're dealing with firsthand. Not that we couldn't potentially, but
because I have to install at least 30 versions of Solitaire because the trial keeps expiring and I need to install the next one.
Sure. Well, it's critical to the business continuity, right? To have Solitaire access. Yeah, not something that we touch currently, but not that we couldn't get into that level of policy administration through this.
Interesting. So
policy administration, I think.
Wait, did you just say something? Yeah, I really love the fact that some of the things that you're doing, how you're complementary to some of the other tools. You've obviously mentioned some rip and replace. That's good. That's good. Before I kind of get into like the policy piece, Jesse, thoughts so far, my friend?
Yeah, I always go into looking at a vendor trying to find ways that I can say no, and I haven't found one yet. So this has been pretty enlightening so far. And I think some things that I want to hit on that perked my ears up is the global intelligence, right? And then the managed support from the threat team. And so I think those are two things for a price point of $1. I'm like, where do I sign up at this point?
Wait, turn it for that. When you say managed support, like, did I just hear the word SOC? Like, oh wait, you're gonna have not SOC, but like have a managed support team watching this like vulnerability pieces come in, and not like from a broad spectrum. You have a global list and you have a team monitoring new stuff that comes in. Part of that rings SOC to me.
This wouldn't go to the SOC though, Tim. This would be like the help desk.
Correct. Corey, correct me if I'm wrong.
And a big company, right? Like they're not gonna. This wouldn't go to the SOC.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Corey. You have a team monitoring the global threats as they're coming in, and you're adjusting your stuff based upon what they're seeing in that global threat. Correct?
Correct.
That to me screams SOC a little bit.
Yeah.
Security Operations Center. You have a team of humans looking at threats coming in at the base foundation of what is a SOC, what is a Security Operations Center. That's one of the key components.
Right.
So I was cruising on Reddit, and this may kind of weave well into this, Tim, but does PC Matic actually provide feeds to other vendors? Are you the engine in some other cars, I guess? Because I heard that was the case. Is that true?
I can tell you, without disclosing too much, I can tell you we are actively building out integrations with other security platforms at a number of different levels, both from feeding intelligence to actually building the technology into the platforms.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I just want to.
So then that level of management, right? Like, could someone manage like over the top, I guess, as Tim's talking about, like a SOC management?
Absolutely.
Like, managing you guys again.
Absolutely.
Okay,
but I think going even back to what Tim was alluding to with our malware research team, and one of the things we kind of flirted with was we could even potentially market this as managed allow listing, because we do add that element of if something gets blocked, whether you want it to or not, it's getting pushed to the cloud, and we're going to touch it and make a determination on it. So
you read my mind. And the fact that when you said you push it to the cloud, and earlier you said my favorite word, FedRAMP, now I don't have to worry too much about my data, right? Pushed in the cloud, FedRAMP, like, yay. Jesse, you had something you wanted to chime in on.
Yeah, I just, again, kind of speaking from building offerings out of this, I think one of the things that I'm always trying to push my clients to do is to level up their client base into companies that will pay more for premium services because I think that's where the margins are. And I think this is a great way to be able to do that, because when you're talking allow listing, you're talking companies that have stricter compliance departments. They have separate risk departments. They have, banking, things like that, that require these things for auditors. And it can't just be a checkbox. You got to prove these things. Let's talk about SOC 2, Type 2, software companies, things of that nature. And these are all companies that are willing to consume these services, and you don't have to convince them that they actually want them. They know that they need them, and they need somebody just to deliver them competently. And so this is an easy way to start building out premium services to level into that next client base. And so I think that's a really important point to make as you start thinking about where does PC Matic fit into your stack from a security perspective.
Good stuff. So I think I heard my favorite word, policy, right? So, one of the things that obviously, we do well and is making sure that we start right at the very beginning. And is there a documented policy? Is there a documented procedure? Is there some standards? Is there some stuff that says this is what we do? This is how we do it. This is why we do it. And then these are the tools to back that up, right? And so I could probably spend the next, we got half an hour or so talking about all of this. But I feel like there might be some synergies in between what we're talking about here when it comes to policies and procedures and the governing of stuff. Because marrying these things together, you can check a lot of boxes, which is like what MSPs like to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the encouraging parts about it that we've seen is we've been doing this for a while, and it was an uphill battle to get anybody to even take a sniff at Allowlisting. Now, through competitive pressure and everything else, and even, what we're seeing from these CISA bulletins that I referenced, people are talking about this. People are talking about this as being a box that needs to be checked.
And you were just 25 years too early.
Yeah, exactly. We, like I say, we were Allowlisting before Allowlisting was sexy. Apparently, it's sexy now, and we're holding up our 8 patents, saying, yeah, we do this really, really well. So we're doubling down on it. But man, I think it's as you see more and more opportunities to help as an MSP, as you see more and more opportunities to help your customers align with things like affirmative defense. I'm here in Iowa. There was just legislation passed recently that said, if you as an organization can show that you in good faith, and man, let's have a conversation about what this means. In good faith, you align your cybersecurity strategy with one of the major frameworks, you can give yourself a certain degree of liability protection if you would ever experience a data breach.
Right.
Great, man. What better way to walk in the door to talk about delivering a managed service that gets that organization that level of liability protection? And let's start with the fundamentals of what's running inside your environment, and you can control it. So
right.
CIS 2.5, 2.6.
Yep.
I just looked it up, Tim. I was like, I knew it was low. I knew it was very low.
I was just about to say CIS 2.
How do we map, right? So
because I know the framework by memories, but you beat me to it, Tim. So good. Yeah, like where does it map? Maybe you have this on your website. If you don't, since you might know somebody in your creative and marketing department over there, you might want to even consider creating this is pick the framework and see the check boxes. Pick the next framework and see the check boxes. I just gave you a piece of marketing advice.
It's in the works, and it will be live within a matter of a couple of weeks, Tim. Yeah.
So you read my mind, like everybody else keeps doing.
You got it.
What about 2.1, 2.2? So let's talk about software inventory. You got the agent on the machine. You obviously know what's trying to be run. Do you know everything that's dormant as well, or like kind of on the?
Yeah, that's one of the real interesting parts about going down the FedRAMP route is we hadn't considered the role we play in that, in being able to, the identify role, not just the protect role. And, NIST says identify is foundational. Great. Yeah, we've got visibility into all of that. And that's something we hadn't spent a lot of time talking about, but man, we've built out reporting and some features that play right to that specifically.
I just had another thought. Do you block PowerShell scripts?
Yes.
How does that affect me when I'm using my RMM tool to use PowerShell to push out stuff?
if we've never seen it before, and again, we can whitelist scripts or allow list scripts as well. If the script has never been seen before, it would potentially be blocked.
Okay.
So there's one check in the column for Jesse letting it run for a week.
Yep.
Yeah. No, because our team, like, we are pretty damn savvy when it comes to writing PowerShell scripts, and I'm like, if I got to do it more than twice, I'm scripting it. So like literally rolling out script after script after script after script. So for us, yeah, that might get a little annoying, but for the typical MSP, probably not as bad as and noisy as it is for us. And I would imagine, like, okay, our team just pushed out 6 new scripts to do 12 different things. Your thing's going to flag that, but for our team to mitigate that feels like it's pretty easy.
Yeah, and there are some options here, and again, this is pushing the edge of my technical acumen here, but we've got the ability to help developers digitally sign their scripts as well, so that we can recognize, all right, if it's something being developed in-house potentially, then we can flag all of those under that same digital signature and include them as part of the local allow list.
You know, it goes back.
I read something on Reddit this morning. Sorry, Jesse, but similar to what you're saying, like they had a client that was like a development shop, right? So they have like a bunch of foreign, and they're making the code up, but they're writing the code, right? So, and he said that the whitelisting service had some way of like identifying like the pattern or like the user or just to simplify that. But sorry, Jesse, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I was just gonna say, it goes back to, I'm just trying to get Tim to get excited here, but it goes back to having a proper change management policy, right? Before you release new scripts into the environment. So part of that could be notifying and using the signage. So so it goes back to the cultural shift, right? If we're what we talked about last week with the trust mark certification, that, that's part of eating our own dog food, is making sure that, we're properly change vetting and doing change management for new stuff we're pushing out into the environment. And, the process is easy. You just have to make sure you're doing it. So,
right. Good stuff.
So while we're talking about the cultural shift, and this is a question back to you guys, at least the vibe we're getting out there is there's always going to be the push for convenience and not being able to step on somebody's toes in accounting by blocking them with a false positive. But there seems to be a renewed interest, at least, if not, maybe acceptance, we're not there yet, in being able to take a more stringent approach to get some stuff locked down. I mean, so much security has been built on convenience or at least attempted convenience, but it feels like there's some end users more willing to have this conversation now, even if it's a minor inconvenience.
So I'll put my other hat on, my personal hat here for a minute, right? So wait, I'll put the OG one on, right? The nice faded one, right? So again, personal opinion aside, right? So I feel like in the technology space for decades, we've been doing it all wrong. Right? Like when we look at the MSPs, when we look at, either like the 1 or 2 human all the way up to the $100 billion MSPs, I feel like we've been doing it wrong. It's always been defense, put a thing, no, block, and we're always chasing our tail, right? Our MSP hasn't started off that way. It's, let's start with, what is our plan? What is our process? Who are our champions? Who are the people? What are we doing? And then defining the requirements, right? Alongside that, I need to protect my endpoint. I need to stop people from installing stuff. Well, that's great. Like shifting that culture, right? Shifting that mindset from block to let's take a proactive approach. Let's shift the narrative here in cybersecurity, in technology as a whole. And I'll go back to my Boy Scout days, be prepared, right? And be prepared up front with a plan. Okay, now I can go back to me.
Corey, so like day one, they install this. There's is there a way to kind of like go really slow, like kind of turn up the dial so like nothing gets denied at first, but like, you know, you're just I guess there's my question is there a dial, right? Like, and obviously if you're working in a federal agency, the dial is going to be turned up very high. But if you're running a local
Bakery,
you know, small retail business, maybe it's not turned up high at all. So is there kind of like a, you know, is there a dial? I guess.
Yeah, there's, I mean, one at deployment, again, we can get into learning mode and just, you know, letting it go and taking a look at the end of the day, what would have been blocked if this would have been active. So there's that piece of it.
Right.
There's also a piece that would allow you to override things more easily. Right. So even giving the end user potentially some options to override, which we strongly recommend against for obvious reasons. But to some degree, yeah, there's a dial in place. We're not quick to advocate that's a good option. We really encourage folks to go all in right away, and we'll refine it as we go, even if it means installing on just a subset of endpoints in a particular department. Or
yeah, it's just that big bang, right? You know,
yep.
It's like nothing works today, and then as opposed to this gradual, like, I just noticed that like I can barely do anything on my security.
The nuclear option can be a good option if in the beginning you start having the why conversation. Once they understand the why conversations, then go nuclear, right? I did want to kind of point something out. So like in our firewalls, we have categorizations of stuff like block the bad websites, block the gambling websites. Like, so does your tool have something like that where there's like categories of things?
We really don't. It comes down to whether that particular executable or script has ever been seen before. I mean, that's really what it essentially comes down to. And if it has been seen before and it's known bad, obviously it's going to be blocked. But if it's never been seen before, it's not a known bad, that's where we simply block it until we can classify it as being good. But we don't get into any type of categories or anything like that.
So there's a new feature request for you.
All right, we'll add it to the roadmap, Tim.
right?
The long roadmap.
No, I think what Jesse and I were kind of both alluding to was like, hey, listen, we know these things are okay, whether they're on your list or not. We want to allow these things, but we definitely, everything else we don't. So we want to like take part in that learning piece, right? I think, Jesse, that's kind of what you were alluding to is we're either nuclear or we're not, but being able to refine that before nuclear.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there, you know, and I don't want to assume too much, but I'm sure there's ways when you're building new scripts out, you can have a dev machine that you submit the script on, approve it, and say this is good, and then it goes right into the allow list category, and off you go when you push it to the environment. Correct?
Yeah, we've got a lot of environments where there's a lot of internal development work being done, scripts being created, and that's where we try to send them down the path of let's get these digitally signed, because if we can get them digitally signed, we put them all under that umbrella. And you're not going to be dealing with those things getting blocked.
Yeah, but digital signatures can be forged. Digital signatures can be mishandled, right? I mean, I think it's a great way, but as somebody that's ripped apart things before, like, I'm a little suspect.
Well,
I think blanket statement. Oh, if it's got a digital signature, it's good.
And to your point, Tim, there was actually a really interesting article by Brian Krebs that was just out this week about it. You probably saw it. And fortunately, I don't think it's a wide scale problem. Does it happen or can it happen? Obviously, yeah, that's part of it. So that's the other reason, you know, we're looking at payload as well. What's actually happening once something detonates, and not just simply the file itself.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of this whole discussion started because of Corey's question. So I think, Corey, to answer your question, you know, is there more of a appetite for, you know, taking some steps that inconvenience, I don't like the word, but taking some additional steps to make the environment more secure? And I think, you know, it goes back to the kind of customer you're dealing with and their risk appetite. And this feeds back into what, you know, we always talk about on this show is being a trusted advisor to the business and knowing what they can tolerate. Because, you don't just want to send it, right? Like send it. It's right.
Nuclear.
Send it. We're turning it all on. We don't know if the customer really. This is a conversation saying, hey, we have this new capability. It's included. It's included with your endpoint price, right? That's the best way to go about it. Say, hey, we want to roll it out. It's going to make you more secure. There might be some minor inconveniences, but it's included, bottom line. Maybe there's a deployment fee or something like that. But then gauging the client and understanding what they're using. Okay, if they're a development shop doing all sorts of custom scripts and deploying it, okay, there has to be a more phased approach. If they're a call center with a bunch of agents taking calls and they shouldn't be doing anything but taking calls, it's really simple because we know they're not running anything additional. If they are, we don't want it to run. So I think it goes back to just, again, having that trusted advisor relationship with your client, understanding the risk appetite, understanding their security acumen, and then building a program that's right fit for that customer. So.
Exactly. So as we wind down here, the last 9, and Jesse, thank you for that. That was a really great summary, right? So we wind down here in the last 10 minutes or so. As an MSP, like looking at your product, yay, I want to roll this out. Like, since you're the marketing person and like that part of that business, do you have sales enablement tools? Do you have marketing enablement tools, right? I want to ask, do you have MDF available? No, like what kind of tools, tech pieces, things, like can you help me as an MSP start to have the why conversation with my clients, right? We see this a lot in the vendor space, which is, here's the tool. Great. What do I do with it? How do I sell it to my client? How do I explain it to them?
Yeah. I think the MSP loves the tech, right? Like, this is great, right? It's pretty amazing what it does. But as you said, how do you convey the why? The non-technical.
We've got all the resources. We've got the partner portal, like every vendor has that. Sometimes clients will access. Most of the time, they never get around to it. So that's all there. What I prefer is to have a bit of a more nuanced relationship with our MSP partners to figure out how they're trying to go to bat. How many salespeople they've got out in the field knocking on doors, and how they're trying to initiate those conversations. And then here are the resources we can bring to bear. We've got XYZ pieces of collateral that we can tag on, but help us at first understand how you're trying to have those conversations, and then let us jump in. And if it's MDF funds, sure, let's get you some MDF funds. But to just throw that out there without any sense of how they're trying to engage their end users just drives me nuts, because vendor after vendor that I see offers, the same old partner portal with the same old cut sheets and same old collateral. We're not beyond putting together some custom things that will address exactly who our partners are trying to talk to. So that's where we try to be, maybe as we get bigger, that'll be harder and harder, but we're still small enough and nimble enough that we can do that on a case-by-case basis.
That's awesome. So since we started this conversation on a rapid fire session of what is this? What does it do? We're going to go right back to that to close us out. So Tim Stir, go.
Yeah, no. So I've seen the demo. If you reach out to Corey, see a demo, it's impressive. It's refined. I'm sure it's on millions of endpoints, right, Corey? Like out in the wild. So it's this was great. I got a further understanding of kind of more so than what I thought it originally did. So excited, and it 2.5, 2.6 on CIS. That is in the top 20% of controls and prioritization, right? So this is incredible value at less than $1 an endpoint. So it just seems like a no-brainer. CIS says it's no-brainer. Cyber insurance is starting. I think we saw that in the last 6 months. We're starting to see Allowlisting on that checklist for cyber insurance. So, thrilled to talk about PC Matic.
And then Jesse.
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback off of that, I like the idea of talking zero trust with your clients and saying it's more than just a network product. We have to think zero trust on the endpoint, because the endpoint is the new perimeter. And then also, as I learn more about the offering today, really what came to my mind is it's peace of mind for me, the MSP owner, right? Because it might not be super visible to the client. We actually don't want it to be because we don't want to block what they're doing, but it's a way to give a better protection for things that might happen in the middle of the night. Things go bump in the night and we don't allow it till the morning. That's probably okay if it's a script running.
Right.
If it's a piece of ransomware, it's not so okay. So it's just another safeguard in that layered defense methodology to help ease your team and maybe, have you staff less after hours and things like that.
Nice. Well, my take, I mean, I came into this like not being allowed to do laundry, not being allowed to do the dishes. And it sounds like great. Like you have to mow the lawn. Like, and these are all the things that I've been allowed to do versus all the other things that I'm not allowed to do. Right. And so now I've been a little educated. I love the fact that you're FedRAMP. I love the fact that you've mentioned you've used a bunch of words in my repertoire. So thank you for that. Corey, why don't you kind of bring us full circle here, talk a little bit about how we can find you, kind of what this all works, what this all looks like, and kind of close us out. And then I'll close us after that.
Awesome. The best way to get in touch with us, pcmatic.com/MSP. You'll see an option to schedule a demo, which is usually the best place to start. We make the demos as painless as possible and get through it in about 20 minutes where you can actually take a peek at what the console looks like and see it deployed in a virtual environment there. To contact me personally, and I know Tim sure is appreciative of the fact that I'm a LinkedIn guy, and man, I'm all in on LinkedIn. So find me out there at COREY. I think it's Munson, MUNSON. Love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Love having conversations about not leading with our solution, but leading people to our solution. And I encourage our MSPs and try to enable our MSPs to do the same. So I'd love to have that type of conversation with you. And if anyone out there happens to be in the ConnectWise community and they're headed to IT Nation Secure in Orlando next week, we will be there. And we've got some pretty cool stuff planned, including a party at a speakeasy, which it's invite only. If you want in, get a hold of me and I'll make sure you get on the list. But I really appreciate the chance to talk, guys.
Awesome. I appreciate you being here, Corey. I'm very envious about all the humans going to IT Nation Secure next year. That was my first conference after COVID that I actually went to and left the house. So, I'm a little bummed that I'm not going to be able to go to IT Nation Secure next week. And I'm not going to be on Team Tim next week either. It's next week the 15th, right? Next week's the 15th, right? Or
2 weeks.
Do I have my date? Oh,
No.
I'll be here then. I'll be here. The reason why I was going to say I won't be here. So I guess I'll just spill the beans, right? So my daughter's getting married, right? And so me going to IT Nation Secure and leaving a couple of days before all that, not a really good idea. But the following week, on the 15th, I definitely won't be here. So you'll see my smiling face one more time next week. Jim, what's coming up next week?
So next week is Garrett Graycheck going to be coming on talking about identity access, right? So we're talking about more at least zero trust, some tools and less so tools, but really the enforcement of controls, right?
Nice. So. Yeah, that one. IAM, Identity Access Management. I like all the acronyms. Mouthful. That.
A lot of those. RBAC, PAM, right?
I got a new one for you, DERPA, and I'll share that during next week's session. What the hell is DERPA? I'll share that with next week. So thanks everybody. We're so glad to have you here. Tune in every week. Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. We love having you here as part of Team Tim. Jesse, thank you so much. As always, great insight. Corey, great session. Thank you so much for what you're doing to help, protect the MSPs and protecting their end clients, right? Let's keep helping those MSPs shift left. I'm Tim Golden, and this is this week's episode of Team Tim.
Thanks, guys.